forgot something.
You kept saying it, and I was going, come on, Richie. I'd like to call this meeting to order for the Public Works Committee of Rapid City for Tuesday, July 31st at 12:30 p.m. First order of business is roll call and determination of quorum. Brenda?
Drew?
Here.
Scott? Modrick? Roberts? Nordstrom? We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next up is the adoption of the agenda. Moved by Nordstrom, second by Modrick. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? And the agenda is adopted. Now is the time for general public comment. A time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the committee on any issue not limited to items on the agenda. Action will not be taken at the meeting on any issue not on the agenda except by placement on the agenda by unanimous vote of the aldermen present. And we have one speaker request form. Okay. So Randy Horsley.
If we can get this to work.
Do we need some help? Okay.
Help is on the way.
Okay, thank you.
We'll do it this way. Okay, so the last time that we spoke...
Could you speak into a microphone, please? We can't hear you.
Sorry about that. The last time that we spoke, you asked that I could bring further evidence to explain what I was talking about when it comes to the Lazy U Motel and the water damage that happened on May 18th. I would like to expand on that and let you know that he had additional damage July 21st, the most recent heavy rain that we had, which I'm sure you're aware was not nearly the quantity of rain that we had on May 18th. What I have here is a set of pictures to explain to you exactly what has transpired at his location. As you'll see here, this is the back of the Lazy U Motel. This is the main office building here, and these are the rows of rooms that were damaged. To the left is Perkins. They have their parking lot here and the sidewalk, and then the water trails down here. This current setup that you can see from this picture has been exactly this way for the last 30 years. Nothing has changed. They've never been flooded before until this year, and nothing has changed in this area. As you walk further down here, you'll see as we get towards the closer to the end, you'll see that there is a trough behind the building that's been receiving water for many years. It's always been sufficient up until this time. This wall here is the new system that was installed last summer. This is the drain, the sewer drain that was installed to accept water from up the road, up towards the 9th Street, West Boulevard area, as well as runoff from Perkins, etc. That was all supposed to go down underground and go beneath the ground behind the hotel there. This is a closer up picture of the actual air conditioners. This is where the water actually came in when it had flooded. You'll see this very small line down here. This is the obvious line where the normal water runoff was in regular situations. It only goes a couple inches up the wall, so they've never had any problems. During this particular storm, the water rose above the air conditioners entirely and actually flooded through each air conditioner on that side of the hotel. This is a closer view of the actual drain that we have here at the hotel. The lighting is really bad here. I'm sorry about that. Right in this area here is the actual drain itself. It's only about 6 inches in circumference, maybe more like 8 or 12, I'm not exactly sure. But that is the only drain that is accepting water from that hillside and into that large sewer system that comes from the Lazy U. Here's a better lighted picture of that actual drain itself. As you can see, it's not very large, and it does cut off at the corner there. If you look over into the sewer itself, you'll see the actual cap that's on the back of this drain. Now, this cap does serve a purpose, as far as I understand, as a backflow cap to keep the sewer drain from backing up and overflowing back into the main area there. Currently, it's being held open because during the May 18th storm, this cap was not being touched. It was just left as it was installed, and that cap did not open whatsoever. As you can see, the water that comes down from the culvert up the road flows off, comes immediately off of this panel, and actually holds that shut, completely defeating the purpose of what it's there for in the first place. During the July 21st storm, he had put a stick in between there to make sure it could not stick anymore or couldn't stay shut anymore. It wasn't sufficient. It still flooded. My client stood outside of his motel in this pouring rain with a 5-gallon bucket and tried to manually save his hotel. He still couldn't get the water out fast enough for it to not flood his hotel. Thankfully, on the 21st, he only got one room on the corner there that was damaged, as opposed to the entire row like it was previously damaged. But I feel like this is a pretty clear example of an incorrectly installed sewer that is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. Second from that, I know that I'm over time already. The one point I wanted to make, the last time I was here, we talked quite extensively about the flooding and how that affected the Hawthorne Basin and all of the flooding over the Robbinsdale area. I completely concur and understand that that is a much more long-term problem and much more long-term solution. However, my client on Mount Rushmore Road was nowhere near that flood basin, and this rain was not because of flood. This was because of a failure of the installation of this system last summer, and that's what I want to try to get something done about. Thank you.
I have a quick question
Sure.
before you sit down. What is your interest in this? And you refer to him as a client. What is that?
I'm the insurance agent on the motel. Naturally, he didn't have a flood policy because there was no realistic reason why he would need one in that location. They never had flood for the 30 years before. They're not in a flood zone or even close to one, and he's on 8th Street. He's on a hill. There was never a reason for him to need one.
Okay, thank you. All right. And that is the end of general comment. We go on to consent items 1 through 13. Public comment is open on items 1 through 13. I don't have any comment slips on that, so public comment is not closed. Now, we're not there. We don't have any public comment. Now it's up to you guys. Okay. So, all right. And now we're on to the consent items 1 through 13. And Lisa, do you have a concern? It's on consent? Yeah? Okay. All right. So we're looking at items from the committee, public consent, or consent items from the committee. Does anyone wish to remove an item to discuss? Seeing no lights, I would ask for, yeah. Yes. Okay. A motion to approve items 1 through 13 by Roberts, second by Nordstrom. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? And the consent items are carried. That brings us on to item 14. Let's see here. Request from MF Properties, LLC for a variance to waive the requirements to install sidewalk per city ordinance 12.08.060 along La Crosse Street for property located at 601 East Omaha Street. And this is continued from our July 10th meeting. I have Dale Tech.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Staff has been working with the applicant on this. The ball's kind of in their court, so I think the appropriate thing to do at this time would be to continue it another 2 weeks. And that'll allow additional time for them to communicate back to us what their desires are.
Okay, I'll ask for a motion to continue.
So moved.
Moved by Nordstrom and second by Lisa Modrick to continue, so it's continued to the next Public Works meeting, and I don't know the date, but in 2 weeks. Let's see, item 15, Engineering Services Division presentation. Ted Johnson, the city engineer. Oh, excuse me, what?
If I may, Madam Chair, I would just like to kind of give you an idea of what we're doing here. Ted Johnson volunteered to go first, but with new members on the Public Works Committee, although she's not here today, over the course of the next 6 meetings, all of our Public Works divisions are going to be giving a short presentation as to who they are and what they do for our community. So Ted will kick it off this go-round, and you'll be seeing the rest of the division managers over the course of the next 5 meetings.
I think that we all welcome that information. Education is always important, so thank you very much. Proceed, Ted.
Thank you. I'm going to just explain a little bit about what Public Works Engineering Services, the Engineering Services Division is, who they are, and what we do. Engineering Services, we have 45 personnel. I'll just read these off. 2 administrative, 5 project administrators, 14 technicians. These are assorted people from mostly our inspectors, observers, traffic workers, electrician, that's our traffic ops personnel, 14 engineers for different groups, stormwater specialists, and now we're GIS, Global Information, Geographic Information Systems as part of under engineering. So there's a coordinator, 1 analysis, and there also is a technician. So there's 3 staff members. We consist of 5 groups: traffic operations, geographical information systems, which is normally known as GIS, development review, design review, and construction group. And our responsibilities: we're responsible for the planning, design, and construction of the city's infrastructure, including streets, drainage, water, sewer. We also manage the streets and drainage and miscellaneous improvements portions, the CIP, and the budget for the streets, drainage, and improvements is part of the CIP. It's approximately $10 million over the last few years. Total average annual project budget for infrastructure improvement, including the other disciplines, is approximately $25 million. Varies year to year, but it's kind of a ballpark number. This is our bids to date for this year. It looks better on your screen than mine. We are at about $19 million in projects bid for infrastructure improvements, utilities, some other city improvements. The one thing this does not show is the streets portion of the East Boulevard and East North Street reconstruction that's scheduled to start next year and the following year. There's about another $2.75 million that is our portion of the DOT project that we'll pay to them. So it's not actually something we bid, it's what they bid. So it doesn't come up on there, but kicks us up to about $22 million with some other projects yet to come this year. Traffic operations, they maintain and operate the traffic signals, signs, roadway lighting, and pavement markings. And this is probably the main function, is to operate the signals and signs, traffic control. They do traffic counts, review traffic impact studies, infrastructure plans, control plans, work with planning, development applications to look at the projects, also look at the design projects, see if the traffic control looks appropriate or to monitor that. And then they perform warrant analysis on intersections. Have been looking at a lot of signs for traffic warrants, also for site triangle obstructions for safety issues. So been fairly busy keeping up with that. GIS provides mapping services and data technical support to the city, to Pennington County, to the public, and to other entities, the state, FEMA, those kinds of things. Rapid Map, and that's probably the one most well-known thing, is available to the public. That shows land parcels, area photos, address points. There's a wealth of information. That's one item that we use consistently in engineering services, not day to day, but several times a day. And they provide GS data to the city and county area orthophotography, which is a pretty substantial word, which generally means that it provides map quality aerial photographs, that they're scalable, that when you look at them, you can scale them off. The stuff is not distorted. So it's fairly critical part to make the rapid map and those kinds of things functional. They also provide topo, tax parcels, street and road maps, and we can do custom maps, or GIS can do custom maps or products or data requests, do sorting and analysis of data in the GIS system. This is part in conjunction with Pennington County. This is a previous slide of a sign inventory that Traffic Ops has been working on. This is a 2011 map. This is today's map. It's a little busier. On this map, there's a little over 8,100 signs that have been inventoried, categorized, and data is acquired on them, so they know what signs they are, where they're at, when they were put up, the conditions of them. So Their sign inventory is fairly extensive and keep adding to it and updating it constantly. Development review consists of a coordinator, 2 other engineers, some technicians, administrative staff. They work with the planning department quite a bit, issue and manage permits for work in the right-of-way, including utilities and access, review and approve private development projects, the preliminary subdivision plans, development engineering plans, looks at the improvements, infrastructure improvements that will serve the city or become part of the city's infrastructure. They also consistently look at multifamily commercial and industrial building permits for land use requirements, for utilities, for drainage, for compliance with setbacks, and review erosion, grading, erosion control, and sediment control plans, issue the permits for that, monitor the work and compliance with erosion and sediment control requirements, and then regulate stormwater activities, which is part of the erosion and sediment control, but look to make sure that it's not adversely affecting adjacent properties or to maintain the water quality and prevent sediment running onto the neighbors or running into the streets and into the creeks. Design group is our largest portion of the engineering services. They're responsible for utility master planning and CIP coordination. We secure the professional services for the city projects, whether through consultants or other forms. I do in-house designs for smaller projects with resources we have. Do consider exceptions to standard specifications. We manage the in-house and consultant projects through the bidding phase. That's from basically scoping the project, identifying the projects, scoping the projects, design phase, and then bid the project. And once it's bid, then the award continues and goes on to the construction group. We do control on-site wastewater permitting. It's on-site septics within the city and the 1 mile zoning or 1 mile limit inside city limits. Manage stormwater management plan, stormwater quality, and then have a floodplain management program in conjunction with FEMA. Here's our most current CIP map, proposed projects from 2018 to 2022, I believe. That just kind of shows where they're at, relationship, and the years planned. This is available online. Yeah, this one is. It's not quite current. This one's still available. And our construction group, their final group, they provide the oversight for construction projects, do the observation, manage the meetings, pay requests, contractor pay applications, change orders, do the quality control, quality assurance for development projects, and then provide construction oversight and inspection of city staff. They also manage the consultant design projects, provide oversight and inspection for those projects. Some of the specific programs we work with is the MS4, Municipal Separate Stormwater Sewer Systems. That is in conjunction with the Clean Water Act and requires an NDPES permit required. National Flood Insurance, we maintain records on that, work with the FEMA National Flood Insurance Program to monitor floods, look at revise some of the, we've done some LOMAR revisions to take some property out of the floodplain with the most recent flood realignment. Work with the Surface Transportation Program. That's a state aid program that provides funding for our local roads systems. And we also manage accessibility with right-of-way ADA compliance program that we track ADA improvements, make sure that our improvements meet ADA requirements, comply with the different upcoming standards or current standards. And then other responsibilities, we do the consultant selection for our in-house projects. We use a qualification-based standard selection system. We are responsible for the infrastructure design criteria manual, standard specifications, drainage basin plans, updates, maintaining that inventory of those plans. We track subdivision improvements and surety, and envision projects, and also handle public service announcements. That's pretty fast, way quicker than I thought it was going to go. If anybody has any questions, I guess I'll stand for that.
Chair recognizes Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may first make a motion to acknowledge this report.
Motion by Nordstrom, second by Modrick. All in favor?
And if I may retain the floor.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Mr. Johnson, would you repeat the CIP dollar amounts that we're spending on infrastructure repair again? I just want to have the public rehear that number. I think it's a significant number, and go ahead.
We average about $10 million per year in the streets and drainage improvements, portion of the CIP, and overall with the utility improvements, it's about $28 million per year.
About $28 million.
Combined with the street improvements and the enterprise fund, sewer and water.
By the time we get all of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
By the time we get them all together, that's kind of what it's average. It varies, and if you look at that one slide, it varies quite a bit, but an average is about in that range, $28 million.
I think that number is worthwhile repeating again. So $28 million a year going into infrastructure within the city. And we're just barely able to keep up. The other division that you have underneath of you is the GIS and the maps. I find that extremely helpful and useful in a lot of different areas, all the way from transportation to the railroad to stormwater. So it's a very good system. So the efforts and the work that goes into that use of that division is extremely helpful, and I use it quite a bit. So thank you for doing that. The other last item I have for the council members or the committee members or even a full council is that if you haven't had a chance to sit on this interview of consultants, I'd highly recommend getting a chance to sit through that process. It's very informational, very informative, lots of, in fact, every once in a while I've run across new technology that we're not aware of yet. So I can't say nothing else, but it is very informative. So I encourage council members to take advantage of that opportunity. Thank you. I'll yield.
Thank you. Lisa Modrick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I ask Dale a quick question? Thank you. Dale, this is terrific. I'm just really glad to have this. I think this is informative for the public as well as for ourselves to remind us how many are behind the scenes or in front of the scenes getting the job done on behalf of the City of Rapid City. I was going to ask you, because it's a good, solid presentation, can this be linked for the Monday meeting so that if we needed to have printouts or the public wanted to, they would be able to do so?
Well, certainly, we can link this to
I think that would be great through this whole process. Thank you for that. And thank you, Ted. I really appreciate your presentation.
And I have a quick question, Ted. I noticed you have a stormwater specialist for those that might be watching or might want to engage this person in a discussion. Who is that?
That'd be Rick Sugar. Our stormwater specialist generally manages the grading permits, the erosion and sediment control. Is different than our floodplain manager. Has different.
So that might not be the person to.
That's not the person you'd want to visit with drainage, with stormwater, flooding, those kinds of issues. Rick would not be the correct person. Rick does more of the construction, say the erosion sediment control, the on-site post-construction.
So you're the person to contact then, Ted Johnson?
I'd be glad to field any calls. Mary Bosworth is our floodplain manager, also Brandon Quiet, the stormwater utilities. So. And
just for information for the public, I'm working with the city planning on hopefully, or Public Works, on doing some kind of a forum on drainage and maybe some self-protection for your property and ways that we can help the public understand how to mitigate flood damage to their own property. So that's something that'll be coming up in the future, just so that people know that we're not really just saying, there's nothing we can do here. There's some educational things that we can do, and we're working on it. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we've got a motion to acknowledge and a second, and all in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, and the report is acknowledged. We go on to the Water Division now, and item 16, introduction and first reading of ordinance 6271, an ordinance to revise the rates, fees, and charges for the city's water utility by amending chapter 13.08 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. I have one person that wants to speak. Why don't we wait to hear from him first? Or Carol Merwin is going to make some comments.
I just want to thank you for taking care of water. We need to pay for it. And if I did my figures correctly, over the 5 years where there was no raise in prices, and 5 years that it will be incremental, we'll be paying like $1.59 a month more than before. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Chair recognizes Dale Tech.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to introduce Dan Kuhn, the Assistant Public Works Director. He's going to give a presentation on this item and stand for questions afterwards.
I feel like I'm having deja vu.
Kidding.
Thank you very much. As Dale said, my name is Dan Kuhn. I'm the Assistant Public Works Director. And following that comment, I don't think I could top that, but I will give you a presentation on the water rate ordinance that we have before you today. Hopefully my computer will work. It's been sitting idle for quite some time. So most of you will remember that in 2017, the city conducted a water and sewer utility rate study. The ordinance that you have in front of you today are the same rates that were contained within that study. And so I want to give you just an overview or a reminder of some of the key components of the rate study that we conducted. The rate study was conducted in accordance with a manual that is developed by the American Water Works Association, AWWA. It's their M1 manual, and it's the industry standard for conducting utility rate studies within the United States. There are three main components that are conducted during a rate study. The first item that we did is look at revenue requirements. And revenue requirements really are just the total of our costs to operate and maintain the water system, what our capital improvement needs may be on a year-to-year basis for the water system, and then any other miscellaneous costs that we have, such as administrative costs to put out bills or just to administer the system. And then we also look at a reserve fund. We look at how much per year do we want to put in or take out of our reserve fund. And so with those costs known on a yearly basis, then we look at how much revenue is required to break even on those costs. Because we are a water utility, essentially we're breaking even on our year-to-year basis. You know, we have no profit, we don't have shareholders that get a dividend. We look at the cost and then look at what is the revenue required to cover that cost. Once the revenue requirement is determined or the cost requirement is determined, we did a cost of service analysis. And what the cost of service analysis looks at is how do we allocate these costs or revenue requirements amongst all the user classes that we have. How much should single-family residents pay? How much should multifamily residential units pay? How much should industrial and commercial pay? And so we try to be fair in distributing those costs among all of the user classes. And then once that's determined, we actually do the rate design. And then that is where we decide this is how much a certain size meter charge should be, how much for a unit rate of water should be for each of the user classes. So in a nutshell, that's the process that we took about 6 months to go through when we did the utility rate study in 2017. Yeah, I don't think it's going to work for me. Yeah, I apologize. This has been sitting too long. It doesn't want to respond. Oh, there we go. So one of the items that came out of the utility rate study was this is a summary of the revenue requirements that I talked about during the course or for the next 5 years. The rate study was conducted for 2018 through 2022. And as you can see, we predict or foresee that revenue requirements or costs will continue to rise over the next 5 years. I think a pretty critical line that I'd like you to look at here is that black dotted line or dashed line. That is our current revenue level. So if we move forward without doing any kind of adjustment to the water rates, that is about where our revenues will be, and you can see we have needs that are above and beyond that revenue requirement. So how does that impact our average user? Our most common user is single-family residents, and I guess I would actually go back and why are the rate adjustments necessary? As I said, we need to fully and adequately fund annual O&M expenses. We need to properly fund our capital improvement plan. And then we also need to meet the financial policies that were set back in October at the end of the 5-year rate period. And those mainly go to how much we will contain in reserves, which I'll talk about in more detail later. So our most common customer is a single-family residence with a 5/8 inch meter, and a typical single-family resident with that size of meter uses 7.5 units of water. And a unit of water is 100 cubic feet, which is 748 gallons. A very easy number to get your head around, I know. So currently, that user using that much water pays $30.72 a month for a typical bill. In 2018, they would pay, if the rates are enacted as proposed, they would pay $33.73, an increase of $3.02 per month. In 2022, that single-family user's water portion of their water bill or utility bill would be $46.66, or an increase over the previous year of $3.65. So I know that 100 cubic feet of water or only 748 gallons is kind of an odd number to think about. It's not easy to visualize. So what we have done, and something that's a little different, is we took it down to a unit that everybody can relate to, and that's a gallon. Everybody knows what a gallon of water or a jug looks like. So 7.5 units is equal to 5,610 gallons of water. So at the proposed 2018 monthly bill of $33.73, if you just divide that by that 5,610 gallons, that equates to 0.6 cents per gallon that an individual would pay to have the water delivered to their home. The difference between present and that 2018 proposed rate is $3.02, which equates to an increase of 0.05 cents per gallon. In 2022, the monthly bill of $46.66 divided by 5,610 is 0.83 cents per gallon. So the difference between a present bill and the 2022 bill is $15.94. Now, I remind you that our present rates are equivalent to our 2013 rates. They have not changed in the last almost 6 years. So the change between 2013 and 2022 of that $15.94 divided by the 5610 is an increase over that 10-year period of 0.28 cents per gallon. Last October, when we brought this forward, there was discussion of reserve funds, and I don't think we did you justice or the public justice. We didn't speak in detail about reserve funds. So I'd like to go through what the reserve funds are, why we like to have them, and why we should have them. Reserve funds are categorized in two basic categories, and these are the categories that AWWA manual identifies. One is unrestricted reserves, and as the name implies, they're reserves that we've identified and aren't specifically targeted or earmarked for a specific, very specific item. They're more of a general type of reserve. We have three main types of unrestricted reserves. We have operating reserves that allows us to respond to emergency repairs, natural disasters, and just unforeseen economic influences. We have capital reserves that allow us to respond to unplanned or accelerated capital projects. And that having that reserve in the water also allows us to respond to the needs of street, sewer, and drainage, because as Ted mentioned, almost all of our projects have one or all four of those components involved in them. So we need to be able to fund water as well as streets to get a lot of things done. And then we have also a rate stabilization reserve. And as we've seen this year, there is a tremendous amount of variability in the weather in Rapid City. And the amount of water usage is very dependent on the weather. If during a wet year like this year, people aren't watering their lawns, the water usage is down, therefore our revenues are down or below normal, what we would expect for this time of year. Could be next year, it's a very, very dry year. People irrigate or water their lawns a lot. The water usage goes up and the revenue goes up. So instead of raising our rates this year and lowering them next year and then raising and going up and down, what we do is we put a stabilization reserve in there so that the water rates stay at a fairly steady pace. People know that next year this is what my bill is going to be in the following year and the following year, instead of why did my water bill go up 50% this year and down 30% next year, and it just becomes kind of a nightmare to administer, really. The other type of funds we have are restricted funds, and these funds are earmarked for specific items within our budget. One of the items is we have the Jackson Springs Water Treatment Plant membrane replacement reserve. We have membranes, which are the filters which clean the water at the Jackson Springs Water Treatment Plant. They have an expected life of 10 to 12 years. And so when we put that plant online, we've decided to put a small amount of money away every year so that when those membranes need to be replaced in 10 or 12 years, that we have the money sitting available and we're not scrambling around trying to wonder how we're going to pay for new membranes. And they can be anywhere from $1 million to $1.5 million. So it's a pretty big hit, and it's a critical piece of equipment that we want to make sure we're ready for. We have a Pactola Operation and Maintenance Reserve with our contract with the Bureau of Reclamation concerning Pactola. We are required to maintain at least $1 million in our reserve fund so that they know we can again take care of the O&M up at Pactola Reservoir. And then we have bond reserves for various bonding that we've done over the years, and it's just required as part of the bond requirement. So the reasons for reserve funds are a critical component of the utility's financial resiliency and sustainability. It allows us the opportunity to address emergencies and unforeseen circumstances. Kind of think about it in a way as your savings account. If something happens, you want to have some money in your savings account so you can take care of it. And I think another thing that I think is equally important, it's a key financial performance indicator. We know that in the future we are going to go out and borrow some money for some large projects. There are just large projects such as a water treatment plant, a reservoir, that we cannot cash flow on a year-to-year basis. So we're going to have to go out and borrow some money, either through a bond or a SRF loan. If the action that the council took last October to put in place the financial policies was a good first step. Now, following those financial policies will be the second good step, in that we need to have our reserves in accordance with our policies, so that in the future, when we go out to borrow money, the people, the bonding companies, the people that are lending us that money are going to look at the city of Rapid City and say, yes, they're being financially responsible, they have policies, they're following those policies, and they have adequate reserve funds. And what that can result in is a better credit rating. The city gets a credit rating just like an individual gets a credit rating. If your credit rating's low, you may not even be able to get the loan, and if you do, you're going to pay more for it. If your credit rating's high, it's easier to get bonding and get a loan, and the terms are more favorable. So what having a good solid reserve fund can do is lower the debt service coverage ratio on bonds and lower the interest rates on bonds and loans. And you can probably imagine if we go out and borrow tens of millions of dollars, a quarter percent on the interest rate can end up being millions of dollars of payment on interest over the life of that bond or loan. Kind of take you back a year or more, just give you a background on how we got where we are today. Utility rate study was conducted by the City of Rapid City in conjunction with HDR in 2017. A fee resolution with new utility rates, both water and sewer, were approved by the City Council in October 2017. Water rates were removed from the ordinance in November of 2017. The removal of water rates from the ordinance was challenged by a citizens group's petition. A special election was held on removal of water rates from ordinance in February 2018. And so that election said water rates were to be contained in ordinance, not resolution, per the election. Therefore, we reverted back to the original water rates that were contained in an ordinance that was passed in 2009 and then last changed in 2013. And then the last action that occurred before today that related to this was water unit rates and meter charges were removed from the fee resolution on June 18, 2018. So it would have been nice if the Water Division or the Public Works Department could have just buried our head in the sand and hope everything came out okay concerning water rates, but we thought that was probably a little irresponsible. So some steps we have taken since February, since the election, not knowing where we were going with water rates. We know that the 2013 water rates will not fund the revenue requirements contained in the 2017 rate study. So we had to make some changes. We've made the commitment to meet our current debt service obligations. I had a assistant finance officer tell me on bonds that default is not an option, and I totally believe that. And we will defer new debt service to the extent possible. Only if we have a contractual obligation of some type will we incur debt, and to my knowledge, we don't have that right now. We reduced the 2022 reserve fund balance target by about 50% of those contained in the financial policies. So our target is now about half of what we would like to have in there. And then we reduced the capital improvement plan, the water portion of the capital improvement plan, by between about $2.5 to a little over $3 million per year. The focus of our capital improvement plan for the water is facilities. We're focused on production and treatment. We feel that it's absolutely necessary that we continue to produce clean water for the citizens of Rapid City. That puts our distribution system in somewhat of a bind, but we feel that with the great work our utility maintenance crews do, we can respond to main breaks and those types of things and get the water where it needs to go the best we can. But if we're not producing that water to begin with, it doesn't matter what type of distribution system we have. There is and can be a domino effect on other infrastructure components. As I said, most of our projects, when we go into a corridor, include streets, water, sewer, drainage. Each one of those 4 items has a separate independent funding source from the other. So if we remove the water funding source out of that equation, it makes it very difficult to go into a corridor and rebuild the entire corridor. So we're having to relook at what types of projects we can do, where we can do them, because as always, we don't want to go in, rebuild a street, and then funding for water becomes available in 2 years and go back and have to tear up the street to put a new water main in that needed to be put in to begin with. So Ted and his group are working very hard on trying to balance out the CIP with the funding available. Now, there are some items that we will not compromise. We will not compromise water quality. The Water Division will continue to provide safe, reliable, and environmentally compliant water to its customers. If we can't do that, we won't supply the water. It has to be good water. We will not compromise the health and safety of the public. We will not compromise the health and safety of the Water Division employees. We will ensure that the Water Division employees maintain their certification and obtain the necessary training to do their job. And then we'll do necessary maintenance on our facilities to make sure that we have safe, reliable, environmentally compliant water. Just a little bit of a history on previous water rate adjustments. I have to admit I did not dig back in the archives into the 1990s. However, conversations I've had with employees that have been with the city a long time or were with the city a long time indicate that the water rates were essentially flat in the 1990s. There may have been some small adjustments, but overall they were essentially flat. I did find a water ordinance in July 2001 that actually failed. There was a follow-up ordinance to that in October of 2002. That ordinance set rates for 2 years in 2002 and 2003. There was a utility rate study very much similar to the one we conducted last year, conducted in 2004, resulted in new water and sewer rates. That the ordinance became effective in November of 2004 and the rates were put into effect in January 2005. The last, prior to 2017, utility rate study that was conducted resulted in new water and sewer ordinances that became effective in January of 2009. And that is the last ordinance that adjusted or raised water rates in the city of Rapid City. So the last water rate adjustment occurred in January of 2013. So current status, Water unit rates and meter charges are as in ordinance in 2013 levels. The ordinance on the agenda is to set unit rates and meter charges at the level recommended in the 2017 utility rate study. We have not modified those rates at all. We felt it was a good plan in 2017, and we feel it's still a good plan today. Why is water important? Well, a water system that provides safe, reliable, and environmentally compliant water to its customers is vital to the economic viability of a community. Try to imagine Rapid City being Rapid City without good, reliable water. I don't know if it's even possible. And then water customers must have complete confidence in the safety and reliability of the water delivered to their homes and businesses. Loss of that confidence can take generations to reestablish. So the action that we're requesting of you today is to place the Water Division back on the path to solid financial footing and pass ordinance number 6271 as it's being presented to you on the agenda today. Thank you for your time, and if you have questions, I will try to answer them.
Thank you, Dan. And the chair recognizes Lisa Modrick.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to accept the first reading and move it forward of ordinance 6271 on the revised rate study. And if I could get a second returning the floor. Second. Thank you. I have an appreciation for Dan's work. I got to serve on the rate study in 2017. It was an advanced study. HDR did a fantastic job, as well as the staff did. And it really was rolling up the sleeves to figure out what was the right process to play catch up. And I like that we saw the 1990s and the flatness of that. That really takes us even further back than the history that we were thinking of before. So now, as to our constituent Carol and her statement of just factoring in the 2013 to 2023, just think if we factored those in. I mean, really, we're paying pennies just to play catch up on our water. So it is, the study did its job. The other part that I want to say that is so important and that stands out is the responsibility of the financials and the way that the water is ran in a business form. It is really easy to understand when you're looking at those numbers and how it fits and how it should fit, so that you're not just working off of yesterday, but you're also moving forward. And water should be our future as well as our present. So I just really appreciate that this is back before us. It's now been placed in ordinance, and I hope that it will proceed forward on Monday, and we have several readings ahead. But thank you again for all your work and for boomeranging it back to us in appreciation.
Chair recognizes Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Kuhn, for this presentation. I think it is very thorough, very in-depth. I came with a long list of questions for you and things for you to repeat, but I'm going to save that for another time. I think basically what we can take into consideration is the years of, well, 6 years of no increase or cost of living adjustment, if that's what you want to call it, to the water rates. The other part of it is that we're going up by just a few cents per gallon to bring this into a stable revenue stream that we need to have. And we can also look at cuts to this. And basically, I did some quick math, and we can do whatever percentage increase that we're talking about. If we did the reverse and cut it by that percentage, it's going to be very expensive to do. It's not going to be easy to do. It's going to be expensive. Or we can cut back on maintenance and upkeep of our system, and that's deferred maintenance. Again, very, very expensive to do, and it's going to catch up and bite us. And so with that, I'll leave that until the Monday discussion, and hopefully the rest of the council will see what we need to do with this and bring this forward to completion. And if I may ask the city attorney just a clarification on something?
Okay. Yes, you may.
Thank you. Joel, the process that we're going through right now, the ordinance and the resolution forms that we talked about in the last go-around in 2017, can you explain to the public a little bit about how this process is going to be going forward, and that it's going to be a little bit different?
Question.
Alderman Nordstrom, I believe what you're referring to is that the ordinances that you previously adopted, they didn't actually implement the rates in the proposal. They simply authorized that the rates be incorporated into the city's annual rate and fee schedule. And then you adopted a new rate and fee schedule. So when the voters rejected that, we were not able to put the new rates in the rate and fee schedule. So the ordinance amendments you had approved didn't change, so we were stuck, and it reverted back to the 2013 rates, which were the last rates in ordinance. So we cannot, for another year, consider putting those back in the rate and fee schedule, but you do have the ability to then update the rates to the rates recommended in the ordinance, because that was not the action that was taken, the last ordinance that was adopted.
Thank you. I think that's makes it pretty clear as to why we have to go through the process we have to do it, the way we're doing it. So with that, I'll yield.
Thank you, Mr. Nordstrom. And then I have a couple of comments and just also one question. As a young person, I traveled a lot in rock bands and into the rest of my career, and saw a lot of towns, a lot of big cities and small towns across the area. And I was always so happy to get back to Rapid City and appreciate the taste of our water, the clarity of our water. All those things, believe me, they don't happen automatically. They are planned for and they are executed by professionals like yourself. And so that to me was very important when I'd come back. I had that appreciation before I was part of the city that we had something really special in our water. And that was just the freshness and the cleanness of it. I also appreciated your explanation on water rate stabilization and how years like this really impact the economic stability of how we do the water rates and how we plan for the years to come, and drought years, wet years, those kinds of things are really interesting. I think that the public doesn't really know that impacts the city as much as it does. And finally, I guess the question to you is, you're such a precise engineer and you give this nice information, but what is this leading to? Is this our water treatment plants are at risk? What is going to be the possible outcome? And I don't want to be the harbinger of doom or whatever, but I do think there's actual risk that we're taking and looking at if we don't pass this.
Well, I think Councilman Nordstrom hit on it somewhat in that we end up with deferred maintenance, and that happened somewhat in the 90s and throughout when we didn't have adequate rates. And I would venture to say we're still trying to catch up to get our water infrastructure to the place that it needs to be. Those types of deferred maintenance, we have great maintenance crews, both on the water production and the utility maintenance distribution side. And those individuals just go out and do whatever it takes to make the system work. But that's not the right way to operate any kind of system. You need to do planned maintenance, you need to do planned replacement so that you're not always in an emergency or crisis mode when you're trying to give something that is as vital as water to the community. So if we don't move forward with these, I think eventually we'll see it probably first in our distribution system. We're going to have breaks or mains that just aren't reliable. You're going to see more breaks, more interruptions of service, dissatisfied customers. As I said, if we, and this is just me speaking, but if we can't put good, safe, reliable water into the system, I think we're better just to shut it off than put something in there that people can't trust to be there and be right. So I guess the short answer is we will eventually pay for maintenance of our water system, and a dollar that you spend on construction today is going to be less than the $2 you spend 10 years from now.
And that's what I wanted to get to. You know, clean water is so underappreciated because we're just used to having that, you know, flow from our taps, no problems. And then if there is one, oh my goodness, it's really a big deal. But that's what we're headed towards, and that's what I really wanted you to highlight, is that, you know, without the proper care and planning, we're going to be running into some major problems. I'd like to recognize Dale Tech right now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to leave the committee and the audience members with a visual. I have 12 gallons of water sitting up in front of us, and I don't know if you can see it, but to the right is $1. That is the cost of that 12 gallons of water in the year 2022.
Great visual. Thank you, Dale. I see no further lights in the queue, and the motion on the floor was made by Lisa Modrick and seconded by Richie Nordstrom to approve the first reading of Ordinance 6271. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, and the motion carries unanimously. Motion to adjourn? Moved by Richie Nordstrom, second by Lisa Modrick. All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned.
Choose to water.
Oh my
This
goodness.
counts as more than our